My tea had long since turned cold, but I hadn't noticed. I was too lost in thought, staring out the window at the dull, grey October sky. The rain drummed against the glass, a steady, monotonous rhythm, almost like the ticking of an old clock in the living room. The kind that keeps track of time, but never asks where it's going. That clock and the rain, they were the only things that seemed to stay constant. The only witnesses to my loneliness. My name is Eunice Grimshaw. I'm 78 years old, and I've been a widow for 15 years now. Sometimes it feels like I've lived more than one life. And now, in this quiet house, I'm living the last one unnoticed. Invisible to the world around me. My house in Cumberland is the only thing that has remained unchanged. A Victorian-style home with 2 stories, a small garden in the back. It used to be full of life, the sound of Gavin's laughter when he was a child, Alfred's voice filling the rooms, the soft hum of music on Sundays. Now there's nothing but the creak of the floorboards beneath my feet and the lonely hum of the radio in the kitchen. I slowly rose from my chair, leaning heavily on my cane. My knees were aching again, a sure sign of rain to come. But what did it matter? The rain was coming, whether I noticed it or not. As I passed the mantelpiece, I paused by a photograph in a simple wooden frame. It was Alfred, my Alfred, on our wedding day. He stood there in a dark suit, his hair neatly combed, a small, slightly embarrassed smile on his face. He worked as an engineer at a local factory, quiet, reliable, a man of few words but plenty of action. He was the kind of man who didn't need to say much. His actions spoke louder than words ever could. Fixing, building, providing. I ran my finger gently along the dusty glass, whispering to him, "What would you say now, Alfred? What would you say about our son?" Gavin came 2 years after we were married. We loved him dearly, spoiled him in the way parents do. But we thought we spoiled him just enough, not too much, but enough to let him know he was special. He did well in school, was polite, always dreamed of becoming an engineer like his father. But everything changed when Alfred fell ill. Lung cancer took him from us quickly, without mercy. I remember the day Gavin found out. He was 37 men, already married to Lavra, working in an insurance company. I thought that grief would pull us closer, but instead, it pushed us apart. At the funeral, Gavin was distant. I can still picture him standing by the grave, tall, thin, his father's features, but something missing, something hollow. As they lowered the coffin, I couldn't hold back the tears. And Gavin, he just stared off into the distance as though none of it mattered. That evening, when everyone had gone home, I asked him if he was all right. He looked at me, his face unreadable, and said, "Mom, I'm 40. I'm not a child. You can't cling to the past forever." I didn't understand then, but looking back, I see that was the moment our connection began to unravel. 3 years later, Gavin divorced Laura. She was a kind woman, sweet, a little naive, but truly in love with him. Why they split up, I'll never fully understand. Gavin just said they grew out of the relationship. They had a son, Keith, who was 10 at the time. The custody was shared, but Keith spent more time with his mother. During this time, I began to notice something in Gavin, something that made my heart ache. His calls became fewer, his visits shorter. When he did come, he would sit, staring at his phone, or talk about work bonuses, promotions, the new car he had bought. I was proud of his success, but I missed the warmth. One day, I tried to talk to him about it. "Gavin, sweetheart, we've become strangers," I said, pouring him some tea. He looked up from his phone, puzzled. "What do you mean, Mum?" "I come over, I call. What else do you want?" "I want your attention, son." "Real attention," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He sighed, one of those sighs you give when you're talking to someone who doesn't understand. I've got a job, Mom. I've got a life. I can't sit here for hours talking about the neighbors or your TV shows. That's not what I mean, I said softly. But he interrupted me, a harsh edge in his voice. You've always been like this. Always wanting more. Dad understood that. But you didn't. His words struck me harder than a slap. I couldn't respond, not that I could find the words. What could I say? That I had worked my whole life as a nurse, sacrificing my own needs so that he could have everything he wanted. That I gave up. Everything to pay for the best doctors when Alfred was sick. That after Alfred died, I was the one who helped Gavin with the down payment on his house. No, I didn't say any of that. A mother shouldn't keep a ledger of her sacrifices, not when it comes to her own child. As the years passed, I came to accept that Gavin only called when he needed something. Money for roof repairs, for a vacation to recover from stress, for new furniture. I never said no. Maybe it was my mistake to give so much, forgive too easily. But wasn't that what mothers do? Isn't that what I had been saving for all these years? But then there was Keith, my grandson. He was the light in all this darkness. Unlike his father, he visited me often, first with his mother, then on his own. When he got older, he helped me in the garden, listened to my stories, brought books. He was the one who insisted that I learn how to use a smartphone. Grandma, you have to keep up with the times, he said, showing me how to make a video call. Otherwise, the world will pass you by. Thanks to Keith, I learned not just how to make calls, but to explore the internet. I started a small gardening blog, writing about my roses. A few dozen subscribers, mostly older women like me, but it was enough. It was my little sanctuary. Keith went off to university in a nearby town to study biology. He came less often, but we made up for it with video calls. He would tell me about his studies, his girlfriends, his plans for the future. I saw in him everything that his father lacked: sincerity, kindness, a willingness to listen. Then, one day last spring, Keith showed up with news that took me completely by surprise. Grandma, Dad's getting married, he said. I stared at him, shocked. After Gavin's divorce, he had dated several women, but none of those relationships had lasted long. To whom? I asked. She works at the dental office. They've been seeing each other for a year, but they've kept it quiet, never told anyone. I vaguely remembered my son mentioning a Jenny in one of his occasional phone calls, but I didn't know the details. Is a good woman? I asked cautiously. Keith shrugged. Normal, a little. Bossy. She's differently with my dad than she does with the rest of us. Sugar sweet, you know? And when she turns away, she's a different person. I nodded. I've known people like that. One face for the chosen few, another for everyone else. Well, if your father's happy, he says he is, but you know, Keith lowered his voice. Even though we were alone, I think he's just tired of being alone. Jenny's very persistent. And she has a daughter from her first marriage. She's 18. They're like a package deal. I smiled at the metaphor. Me clever. Grandson, people get married for all kinds of reasons. Honey, it's not for us to judge, yeah. But he hesitated. They want a big wedding. A very expensive one. Dad said he was going to ask you to help with the money. That's it. I felt bitter, but not surprised, of course. Gavin didn't call himself. He sent his son to do some recon. Grandma, you don't have to. Keith continued, noticing my reaction. You have your own plans for that money. It brushed it off. What plans at my age? A cruise around the world. I tried to smile. Money is for the living, not the dead. If your father needs help, I'll help. Keith shook his head. Sometimes you're too kind, Grandma. Maybe he was right. But what else was there to do? Refuse my only son. Besides, I'd hoped the wedding would bring us closer together. Maybe Jenny would turn out to be better than Keith described her. Maybe she'd make Gavin happy, and a happy son is all. A mother called. Asked for Gavin. Called a week later. His voice sounded strained and cheerful, as it always did when he wanted to ask for something. Mum, How's your health? You're not sick? I'm fine, son. My joints are a little sore, but that's age. Yes, age. He coughed. Listen. I got news. I've decided to get married. I acted surprised, really, to who her name's Jenny. She's a wonderful woman. You'll love her, smart, caring. A great hostess. I'm happy for you. I said sincerely, when do you plan to get married? He was silent. In 3 months. I know it's fast, but we don't want to wait. And you know, Mamana the pause, we want a beautiful ceremony. Jenny deserves the best, of course. I agreed. Every bride dreams of a beautiful wedding. Be coughed again. You know, I've been having financial difficulties this past year. Renovations, new car. How much do you need, Gavin? I asked him straight out. He gave me a number. I almost dropped the phone. It was 3 times what I expected. That's a lot, son, I know. Mom, but it's a wedding. It's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. Well, it's a second for Jenny. But she says the first one was a bust. She wants to do it right, you know, rent the Hilltop Manor, invite 100 guests, live music. Hilltop Manor is the most expensive venue in Cumberland, an old mansion overlooking the lake, insanely beautiful, but insanely expensive. 100 guests. I asked, do you have that many friends? Well, not just friends. Colleagues, acquaintance. Jenny's relatives. He hesitated. Mom, you'll help, won't you? I'll pay you back. I promise. We both knew he wouldn't, just like he never paid back the money for the house, the car, the vacation, but I said yes, because he's my son, because I hoped this wedding would make a difference, because what else could I do? Okay. Gavin, I'll help. Thank you, Mom. He sounded genuinely relieved. You're the best. Jenny will be so happy. After that conversation, he called more often every week, sometimes twice, talking about the preparations, about Jenny, about her daughter, Abby. It felt like we were getting closer again. I was happy about it, though somewhere deep down, I knew he was only interested in money. A month later, Gavin arrived with Jenny. She turned out to be a pretty woman with dyed blonde hair, bright makeup, and a flashy manicure. Smiled a lot, but her eyes remained cold. She looked around the house, her eyes lingering on the antique clock and silver tea set, an inheritance from my mother. What lovely things, she said. They must be expensive to me. Yes. I answered, they belong to my mother. Antiques are expensive now. She said casually. We drank tea and talked about wedding. Or rather, they talked and I listened. Jenny described the dress, their flowers, the menu. Gavin nodded with the look of someone who'd heard it for the 100th time, but still found it fascinating. I asked if there was anything I could do to help other than financing. Oh, don't worry, Eunice. Jenny patted my arm. At your age, it's better to rest the wedding planner, and I will take care of everything. I'm not that infirm. I said you could help with seating, or I'm not that infirm. I said no, it's already planned. She interrupted, just come and enjoy yourself, as they drove away. Jenny gave me a dry, formal hug. We're so glad you'll be at our wedding. And Eunice, it means a lot to Gavin. Something in her tone made me wary, like she was doing me a favor by letting me attend her own son's wedding, a wedding I was paying for after they left. I sat at the window for a long time, staring out at the rain. Something told me this wedding wasn't going to make Gavin or me happy, but I chased those thoughts away. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe Jenny really did love him. Maybe it was just hard for me to let go of my son, to accept that he had chosen another woman as the center of his life. Keith called that evening. How did it go meeting your future daughter-in-law? He asked, with a slight irony. It was fine. I didn't want to turn me grandson against his father. She's energetic. Keith grinned. That's one word for it, Grandma. Be careful. Jenny knows how to charm when she wants something. I have nothing to give her but money for the wedding, I said, and I've already promised her that it's not just money. Keith's voice became serious. She wants to control everything around Dad, including you. I'm hard to control. I smiled. I'm too old for that, I hope. So Keith sighed. Just don't let them use you, okay? I promised, but I realized even then that something had started something. I couldn't stop, like a snowball rolling down a mountain, gaining speed and mass, and I was just an observer, powerless to change the trajectory. The phone rang again. Gavin's name came up. He probably wanted to thank me for the warm welcome he had to ask for. More money. I took a deep breath and pressed the answer button. It was a cloudy morning, but it wasn't raining. A small victory for my aching joints. I walked slowly down the stairs, holding onto the banister. Today was the first meeting with the wedding. Planner Gavin had called yesterday saying Faith and Jenny had booked a cab to pick me up at 10 o'clock. Be ready, Mom, don't be late. Miss Potter is a very busy person. He ranted hurriedly, as if I were a child. I wanted to remind him that I'd never been late once in my entire life, not to work at the hospital, not to parent-teacher conferences, not to his school concerts, but I'd been silent a lot lately. In my conversations with my son at 9:30, I was ready, a grey dress with a collar, a pearl brooch. Alfred's gift for his 20th wedding anniversary, low-heeled shoes. I looked in the mirror and fixed me. Grey hair in a neat bun. The cab arrived exactly at 10 o'clock. The ride to Hilltop Manor took 20 minutes. The familiar streets of Cumberland, the city where I'd lived all my life, floated by the corner store that had once been a bookstore and now sold coffee. The park where little Gavin liked to feed the ducks. The hospital where I'd worked for 35 years. Hilltop Manor greeted me with a stately facade, an 18th century Georgian mansion, surrounded by manicured parkland and overlooking the lake. I remember a check I'd written to Gavin 2 weeks ago, and sighed heavily. All my life I'd been saving for a rainy day. Now those savings were slipping through my fingers. Jenny met me at the entrance, her makeup flawless, hair styled in wave-ish, a tight beige dress emphasizing her figure. She made me feel old and out of place. Eunice, finally, she pecked the air near my cheek. Miss Potter and I have already started. Come quickly. I wanted to say that I had arrived at exactly the right time, but again, I remained silent. I shouldn't have started the day with bickering Gavin and a woman in her 40s in an austere suit. Presumably Miss Potter were waiting for us in the spacious hallway, with its marble floor and crystal chandeliers. My son looked tense, as if in an important meeting. He gave me a brief hug and introduced me to the organizer. Mom, this is Veronica Potter, the best wedding coordinator in the county. Veronica, this is my mother. Eunice Grimshaw. Miss Potter explained the concept: an elegant modern wedding with some traditional elements. Ceremony on the terrace overlooking the lake, followed by cocktails in the garden and dinner in the main hall. The color scheme lavender, silver, and white. Alfred, my late husband, was always fond of white roses, I remarked when it came to flowers. Jenny gave me a strange look. We haven't approved the roses yet. And Eunice, it's just a suggestion. Personally, I'm leaning towards pies. We stepped out onto a large terrace with white columns. The view was breathtaking. Manicured lawn sloped down to the lake with a light mist overhead. This is where we'll set up the arch for the ceremony. Miss Potter pointed to the center of the terrace. The chairs for the guests will be arranged in a semicircle. After the vows-airy exchange, the newlyweds will walk down these stairs to the garden where cocktails will be served. What if it rains? I asked. The weather around here is unpredictable. Jenny rolled her eyes, but Miss Potter patiently replied, we have a backup plan in case of inclement weather. The ceremony will be held in the musicala in the main hall where dinner was planned. Miss Potter unfolded the seating plan in front of us. We are proposing 10 rounds of 10 plus a head table for the newlyweds and immediate family. Who will sit at the head? I asked. Gavin, me, my daughter, Abby, my parents, my brother and his wife, and 2 of our closest friends. Jenny answered without looking at me. And me? I asked in surprise. There was an awkward pause. Mom, there are only 10 seats at the head table. Gavin finally said, we thought you'd be more comfortable at the table with your friends. What friends? I was confused. You invited someone I know. Jenny and Gavin looked at each other. Well, we thought you'd tell us who to invite. My son said uncertainly. I didn't name anyone because you didn't ask. My voice shook. And I assumed I'd be sitting next to you, Gavin. I am your mother after all. Miss Potter coughed, clearly feeling uncomfortable. I'm sure you can revise the seating plan, perhaps add a seat at the head table. No, Jenny quickly intervened. It's already been approved symmetry is important for photographs. And Eunice, you do realize that a wedding is first and foremost about the couple. Don't you? I could feel the color flooding down my face. Of course, said wedding is about the newlyweds, but is it normal for the groom's mother to sit in a corner somewhere with strangers? It's okay, I said, trying to smile. I can sit wherever you want. Gavin exhaled with relief, and Jenny smiled victoriously. That's fine. Speaking of guests, we've made a tentative list: my relatives, co-workers, friends, a few of Gavin's important clients. How many people are on the list? I asked. 115, Gavin answered, avoiding my gaze. But you said 100. I was stunned. Every additional guest is an additional expense in Eunice. Don't be so petty, Jenny said, as if to brush me off. 15 people won't make a difference. Besides, they were potential investors in Gavin's new project. When the conversation turned to wine selection, I ventured, what about Lauren champagne? It's great quality, but not as expensive as Crystal. Jenny looked at me, as if I'd suggested serving vinegar to the guests. Lauren? Really? At my wedding I was just suggesting it. I shrugged. After all, it's a considerable savings on Eunice. Jenny lowered her voice. If you can't afford to pay for a proper wedding, just say so. The humiliation stung more than anger. I didn't say I couldn't afford it. I merely offered a reasonable alternative. Please, Gavin interjected, let's trust the professionals. By noon we were done with the planning and moved to the restaurant for lunch. Jenny immediately ordered a bottle of the most expensive wine on the menu. I mentally counted how many more such gestures I could afford before my savings ran out completely. At lunch, Jenny became more talkative. You know, and Eunice, I've always wanted a real wedding. The first time it was so Modestown hall dinner for 20 people. My husband insisted on saving money, but now I can do everything I dreamed of on me, I thought, but only smiled politely. Andy, our dress, I asked, have you picked it out yet? Oh yes. Jenny's eyes lit up. It's from a designer coming from London, ivory, embroidered with crystals, with a 3 meters train. Sounds impressive. What about you, Gavin? Custom-made suit too? My son is embarrassed. Well, we're thinking about it. There's a tailor in London. Of course the suit will be bespoke. You can't show up in a store suit. It's move. Jenny interrupted him as the car pulled up in front of my house. Jenny said, by the way, Eunice, about your outfit. What are you planning to wear? I have a blue dress. I wore it to a friend's wedding last year. Blue? It doesn't really fit in with our color scheme. You'll have to get something that matches silver or a very light lavender. And not so old-fashioned without your collars and brooches. I felt a pang of resentment. My collars and brooches are part of me, part of my style. All right, I'll think about it. Don't think about it, but do it. Jenny smiled, her fake smile. The pictures had to be perfect in the evening. I got a call from Keith. Hi, Grandma. How was the meeting with the organizer? Informative, I replied evasively. Hilltop Nana is a beautiful place and crazy expensive. My father told me you discussed the menu and seating. Did you like their ideas? It was so luxurious, Grandma. I know that tone. What's wrong? Nothing much. I just feel a little overweight. I'm paying for the wedding, but I have no say in the decisions. I'm surprised my father allows it. Keith sounded annoyed. He's always been soft, but not to this extent. Jenny's spinning him any way she wants. Maybe he's just in love, I suggested. People often lose their heads in love at 52 after a divorce and 20 years of living on their own. No, Grandma, it's something else. Jenny's a manipulative woman. Keith, honey, don't worry, it's there. It's there. Did you see? Oh no, Grandma. It's not right. I'll talk to Daddy. Please don't. I said hastily. I didn't want to cause trouble. You're not causing trouble. They're the ones being disrespectful. You're paying for all this madness and they treat you like an unwelcome guest. The next day came the promised estimate from Miss Potter. The final total was 30% higher than originally discussed. It was almost all I had left after decades of saving, almost everything I could leave Keith as an inheritance. I picked up a pen and signed a consent form agreeing to all expenses made. At least it would give me back a place in my son's life. The next 2 weeks passed at a sort of feverish pace. Jenny called almost every day with new ideas, demands, and complaints. She didn't like the shade of the tablecloths. She had to change the menu. because of some important guest allergies, or there was a problem with the musicians one day, shackled in a particularly irritated state on newness. Did you find the right outfit? I ordered a dress silver grey, just like you wanted silver grey. We said lavender, no, Jenny. You said silver or very light lavender, I chose silver. But it's not appropriate. The groom's mom has to wear lavender, and the bride's mom has to wear silver. It's the whole concept. You didn't mention it before, I remarked, feeling my irritation. Rising, the dress is already paid for, return it. Jenny said, and buy the lavender one. I'm sure you can find something suitable in 2 weeks. I took a deep breath, counting to 10. Jenny, I feel ready. Spent a considerable amount of money on this dress. I'm not returning it. What do you mean? You won't. Her voice arose. Do you want to ruin the composition? The pictures will look terrible. I'm serene. No one will notice that detail. I said calmly, I will notice. There was a sound like Jenny hitting the table on newness. If you really want to support Gavin, you will do as I ask. I closed my eyes. This was it, the manipulation. Keith was talking about. Jenny was using my son as leverage. Okay. I gave in. I'll see what I can do. Great. Jenny's tone instantly changed to sweet. I knew you'd understand. I'll send you links to some good options. 5 minutes later, my phone was blowing up with alerts. Jenny had sent links to dresses from boutiques in London. All of them cost at least 3 times what I'd already bought, and they all looked too youthful for a woman my age. Deep necklines, open shoulders, sequins. I didn't call her right away. Instead, I went to the mall in the next town and spent the whole day going from store to store. Finally, I found a modest dress in a soft lavender shade with long sleeves and a stand-up collar. It was elegant, age-appropriate, and color-appropriate. I took a picture of it and sent it to Jenny. The reply came back in a minute. It looks like the funeral clothes of an elderly nun. Can't you find something stylish? I stared at the phone screen, feeling my cheeks burn with humiliation. The saleswoman standing next to me cast a sympathetic glance at me. Apparently, my face expressed everything I was feeling. Having trouble choosing, ma'am? She said politely. You could say that. I sighed. My future daughter-in-law thinks I should look like a 20-year-old at her wedding. The saleswoman smiled understandingly. I have something that might fit. It's from the new collection, not yet on display. She brought out a lavender-colored dress with silver trim. It was elegant with 3/4 sleeves and a moderate but not old-fashioned collar. It was just below the knee, light chiffon, nothing fancy. It's beautiful. I said sincerely, may I try it on? The dress fit perfectly. I took a picture in the fitting room and sent it to Jenny with a quick message. How about this? It took a while for a reply. Finally, the phone beeped. It'll do, but the accessories have to be silver, no pearls or old-fashioned brooches. I showed the message to the saleswoman. She rolled her eyes. Your sister-in-law sounds like a true treasure, she said ironically. She's energetic, I replied diplomatically. Have some great silver accessories. She pointed to a display case. I can find something to match your dress. In the end, I bought both the dress and a set of silver jewelry, a modest necklace and earrings with small amethyst. They harmonized with the lavender hue of the dress and looked modern enough to satisfy Jenny in the evening. Gavin called. His voice sounded strained. Mom, did you talk to Jenny today? Yes, a booth dress, I replied. It's already decided. I bought something she liked. Good, he exhaled with relief. She'd been freaking out about it all day. You know, the wedding is in 3 weeks. Everyone's nervous, on edge. I understand, I said softly. Look, Mom, he was quiet. I know that Jenny can be demanding, but she just has her own vision. She wants everything to be perfect. Of course, I agreed. And also, he hesitated again. We were thinking maybe you shouldn't come to the rehearsal the night before. It would be very hectic and it's hard for you with your knees to stand for long periods of time. Just come straight to the ceremony. Okay. I felt my heart squeeze. I was being excluded from another part of the wedding. Whatever you say, Gavin. My voice sounded steady though inside I was seething with resentment. Think you, Mom, you're the best. He was obviously glad that the conversation had gone without conflict. I'll send you a cab on your wedding day after the call. I sat in the chair for a long time, staring out the window. It was getting darker outside and my Reflection in the glass became more and more distinct, a grey-haired woman with tired eyes wended. I turn into someone my own son is embarrassed by a week before the wedding. Jenny organized a bachelorette party. I wasn't invited, of course. I found out by accident when I called Gavin, and he said he was busy with friends at the pub because the girls had taken over the house for their party. I felt particularly lonely that night. I dialed Keith's number. Grandma, he cheered. I was just about to call you. How are you? Fine. I tried to smile, but he couldn't see it. How's school? It's okay. Listen, I was wondering if you were coming to the rehearsal for the wedding. No, I answered. Gavin said it would be hectic, and I better come straight to the ceremony. There was a pause. Oh, Keith's voice turned cold. And you said yes. What was I supposed to do? To tell him that you were Reeve, mother of the groom, and that you have the right to attend the rehearsal for the wedding which you are paying for? Keith exclaimed. Grandma, they're just using you. They want your money, but they don't want you. His words hurt even though I knew he was telling the truth. Keith, I don't want to cause any trouble before the wedding. Just let it go on as it is. It's not right, Hess said stubbornly. I'll talk to my father. No. I almost shouted, please don't get involved. It'll only make me feel worse if you make a scandal. He reluctantly agreed, but I could feel his resentment through the phone. The night before the wedding, I hardly slept at all. My thoughts revolved around tomorrow. How will I be greeted? Where would I be seated? Would I have to spend the entire evening in the company of strangers? Would Gavin notice my presence except in formal photos? I took a long time getting ready in the morning, carefully styling my hair and applying light makeup. I put on a new lavender dress, silver jewelry, and looked at myself in the mirror and was surprised to note that I looked good, elegant, dignified. The appointed time the cab pulled up, I checked the honeymoon gift one last time. An envelope with a check for a substantial sum tied with a silver ribbon, and left the house. The drive to Hilltop Manor seemed shorter than last time. Or maybe I was just immersed in my own thoughts. When I got out of the cab, I saw that the guests were already gathering on the terrace. The weather was beautiful, sunny, but not hot, a light breeze ruffling the leaves. I headed toward the entrance, my heart pounding. There was a day ahead that could be the beginning of a new relationship with my son and his wife, or the final confirmation that I was nothing more than an ATM machine with grey hair to them. I woke up with the first rays of the sun. It was a clear day outside my window, as if nature itself had decided to provide the perfect weather for my son's wedding. Against Gavin's advice not to arrive early, I decided to go to Hilltop Manor 2 hours before the ceremony officially began. It wasn't out of stubbornness. I just wanted to help, to be useful, to feel part of the big day. I booked a cab for 9 o'clock in the morning, even though the guests were not expected until 11. As the driver loaded my small purse into the trunk, I looked around at my house. Somehow it felt like I was going away for a long time, even though he'd planned to return in the evening. A strange premonition pricked my heart, but I brushed it away. It's a beautiful day for a wedding, the driver remarked as we pulled onto the road. Yes, the weather is beautiful, I agreed, smoothing the folds of my lavender dress. Are you the mother of the bride, the groom? I corrected. Oh, you must be very excited. Son's there. Special to mothers. I just nodded, not wanting to go into the complexities of our relationship. Instead, I stared out the window at the Cumberland landscape, wondering how Gavin's life would change after today. Would he be happier? Would he find a true partner in Jenny? And will I be able to find my place in their new family? Hilltop Manor was already bustling with preparations when we pulled up. Delivery vans were parked in the driveway. Workers were installing additional lighting. Florists were carrying baskets of flowers. I paid the cabbie and headed toward the main entrance, feeling a little awkward. Maybe Gavin was right, and maybe I shouldn't have arrived so early. In the lobby, I ran into Miss Potter, who looked both collected and a little anxious. When she saw me, she raised her eyebrows in surprise. Mrs. Grimshaw, your very early ceremony isn't until 11:30. I know. I smiled. I thought I might be able to help. It is my son's wedding, after all. Miss Potter glanced at her watch. That's very nice of you, but we have everything under control. The guests will start arriving in 2 hours. Perhaps you would like tourists in the library. It's quiet now, and there's a lovely view of the garden. I realized I was being politely dismissed, but I decided not to give in so easily. Where's Gavin? I'd like to congratulate him before the ceremony, mister. Grimshaw is preparing in the east wing, that he is scared to be disturbed before the event, miss. Potter spoke softly but firmly for wedding excitement. You understand, I nodded, though I squirmed inside my ounce and didn't want to see me, before the most important moment of his life was. I really that burdensome to him? And Jenny asked, already knowing the answer. Miss Malcolm and her friends are in the West Wing. They're finishing their makeup and hair. Strictly female company, miss. Potter smiled professionally. Don't you have a cup of tea in the library? I'll send someone over when it's time to take seats. Giving in, I allowed miss to be escorted into the library, an elegant room with bookcases to the ceiling and comfortable armchairs by the window. As soon as the door closed behind Miss Potter, I felt trapped, isolated from the holiday. I'd paid for myself. 20 minutes later, a young waitress stopped by with tea and cookies. I thanked her and asked how the preparations were going. Very stormy, ma'am. She replied, their bride has already changed the arrangement of the flowers in the main hall twice, and there seems to be some problem with the cake, the wrong shade of frosting. Really, I couldn't hide my surprise. The pastry chef is one of the most expensive. Yes, ma'am, but Miss Malcolm is very precise in her wishes. The girl was obviously choosing her words. She wants everything to be perfect. After the waitress left, I went to the window. It overlooked the terrace where the archway for the ceremony was almost finished. White chairs stood in neat rows with a pedal-strewn path between them. Everything looked immaculate, and all without my involvement. I decided not to sit in the library until the guests arrived. After all, I'd paid for this wedding, and had a right to see how the preparations were going. Stepping out into the hallway, I headed toward the main hall where the dinner was to be held. The hall had been transformed since my last visit. The tables were covered with snow-white tablecloths, set with silver and crystal, decorated with arrangements of lavender and white flowers. At each place was a card with the name of the guest. I found me table in the farthest corner, just as I'd expected, near the exit to the kitchen. I grinned symbolically as Grimshaw, a man's voice, called out to me. I turned around and saw a young man in a suit, one of Miss Porter's assistants. The guests were beginning to arrive. Miss Porter said, "You should take your seat for the ceremony already." I glanced at my watch. It was longer than I thought. As I stepped out onto the terrace, I saw that the first guests were indeed seated. The master of ceremonies pointed me to a seat in the front row. The only consolation of the day, at least I would be close to Gavin during the exchange of vows. Gradually all the seats filled up. I stole glances at the guests, mostly people younger than me, many obviously wealthy. Judging by the outfits and jewelry, I recognized Jenny's relatives from the family resemblance, the same confident posture, the same appraising glances. Finally, the music started, and Gavin walked down the aisle in an elegant suit that must have cost a fortune. He looked tense, but handsome. My heart filled with pride. No matter what, his best man, a co-worker I'd seen a couple times at corporate parties, stood next to him. Gavin looked around at the crowd, and for a second our eyes met. He smiled and waved lightly. He nodded back, but then looked away, as if embarrassed. Music changed. The guests rose and Jenny moved slowly down the aisle. I had to admit she looked stunning. Her ivory gown embroidered with crystals was perfectly fitted, the train trailing behind her like a sparkling brook. Her face shone with triumph. She had gotten everything she wanted. The ceremony was flawless. The exchange of vows, the exchange of rings, the first kiss, ashband and wife, all exactly as scripted. I furtively wiped away a tear as Gavin recited his vows. Despite the challenges, I was happy for him, or wanted to be happy. After the ceremony, the guests moved to the garden for a cocktail reception. I kept a little to the side watching Gavin and Jenny accept congratulations. A few people came up to me, introduced themselves, made polite small talk, and stepped away. I felt like a stranger at this celebration of life. Suddenly someone called out to me. When I turned around, I saw Keith hurrying toward me through the crowd. My grandson looked all grown up in an austere suit, his hair slicked back. "Grandma." He hugged me tightly. Finally found you. How are you? I'm fine. Honey, I snuggled up to him for a moment. You're very handsome today, and you look stunning. He pulled away, looking over. That dress really suits you. Thank you. I smiled. Jenny picked it out. Keith grinned. Of course, she did listen. Have you been introduced to her relatives yet? They're sitting in a separate group by the fountain like royalty. No, I shook my head, but I didn't expect them to. The newlyweds have a lot on their minds today. Busy, Keith snorted. All Jenny does is pose for pictures and take compliments. She could have taken a minute to introduce you to her family, Keith. I glanced at him warningly. Let's not, it's our wedding day, we don't want to overshadow it. He nodded, but I could see he was barely holding back. All right, Grandma, but I'll stay with you. I don't want you to sit alone, honey. You have your own company. I nodded toward a group of young men, clearly Keith's friends. Go have fun. I'm fine. He reluctantly agreed, but before he left, he whispered, if you need anything, call me right away. Left alone, I decided to walk through the garden. Everything was decorated with impeccable taste: fountains, flower arrangements, lights ready to shine in the evening. The cost of all this splendor made me shudder inwardly. But I reminded myself that I had done it for Gavin. The newlyweds' photo shoot seemed to last forever. The photographer combed them like a general on parade, forcing them into various poses. Against the picturesque backdrop of the estate, I watched from a distance, hesitating to approach. At some point, they started taking group photos with relatives. E wasn't invited. I saw Jenny hugging her parents, Gavin shaking hands with her father. My son was surrounded by a new family, with no room for me. Finally, the gong rang, inviting the guests to dinner. Found my table in the far corner of the hall. There were a few older guests sitting at it. I figured they were Jenny's distant relatives who hadn't been given a seat at the main table. Either we introduced ourselves, politely exchanged a few sentences about the weather and the beauty of the ceremony. The dinner was exquisite, the wines expensive, the service impeccable. But I barely noticed the taste of the food. All my attention was on the main table, where Gavin and Jenny sat surrounded by her relatives, laughing and chatting like old friends. Not once during the entire dinner did my son glance in my direction. After dessert, the toast began. Jenny's father, a full man with a loud voice, spoke first. He talked about what a wonderful girl his daughter was and how lucky he was to have a son-in-law. Then the best man came forward with stories about Gavin. Everyone was mentioned. Jenny's parents, her daughter from her first marriage, even the dog that used to live with them. Not a word about me. When formal part was over and the guests dispersed, I felt an urgent need to get some fresh air. I felt dizzy from Thuine I had drunk and the bitterness of realizing that I was useless. I walked out onto the terrace where the ceremony had been held. A few hours before, the chairs had been removed, but the arch of flowers still stood, illuminated by soft light. I took a deep breath of the coolvening air. Suddenly I wanted to leave, to go home, to forget this day, like a bad dream. But I couldn't. I had to wait. Forth cutting of the cake for the first dance of the newlyweds. I had to smile and pretend everything was all right there. You were Jenny's sharp voice came from behind me. I've been looking all over for you. I turned around. She was standing in the doorway, sparkling and beautiful in her wedding dress. But the expression on her face didn't fit the image of a happy bride. Her eyebrows furrowed, her lips pressed into a thin line. Is something wrong, Jenny? I asked, trying to stay calm. What's wrong? She stepped closer to me, swaying on high heels. She smelled like champagne. Ruined my wedding, that's what happened. I was confused. What are you talking about? I've been trying to be inconspicuous all day, invisible. She interrupted with a bitter laugh. You came here 2 hours early, spying on the preparations, poking your nose into everything, and now you've come out here to draw attention to yourself, when everyone's looking for us to cut the cake. Jenny, I was just getting some air. My voice shook. I didn't know about the cake, didn't pretend. She raised her voice. You've been trying to ruin my day from the beginning, first by arguing about every little thing, then by showing up early in the morning when you were told not to, and now you're making a drama out of it. I stared at her, stunned. What had happened to that sweet smile she'd given her guest just a few minutes ago? There was a completely different woman standing in front of me, angry, aggressive, a drunk. Jenny, calm down. I tried to speak softly. I didn't mean to ruin anything, I just shut up. She shouted so loudly that several of the guests on fairytales turned around. I know what you're doing, you've always done this. Gavin told me how you controlled him all his life, how you smothered him with your care. I felt the blood drain from my face. My son said that it's not true. I said quietly, I only ever wanted the best for him. The best. Jenny snorted contemptuously. You wanted him to always depend on you, but now he has me and your manipulations won't work anymore. By now a small crowd had gathered. Around us I could see the shocked faces of the guests, hear the whispers. The humiliation stung more than anger. Jenny, please. I took a step toward her, holding out my hand. Let's not make a scene. This is your day, don't touch me. She recoiled like a leper. Andes. It is my day, a day you're trying to ruin with your presence. Gavin appeared in the doorway, alarmed by the commotion. What's going on? He looked from empty. Jenny, your mother, Jenny exclaimed, pointing a trembling finger at me. She came out here on purpose to disrupt the cake cutting so everyone would be looking for her instead of enjoying therapy. Mum. Gavin turned to me, his eyes were not understanding, but annoyed. Why you here? Everyone's waiting. I was just getting some air. Repeated, tears welling up in my throat. I didn't know they were looking for you for the cake. See, Jenny clutched that Gavin's arm. She's in denial, typical passive aggression. She always does that, you said so yourself. I looked at my son in despair, expecting him to refute her words, to say he'd never said such a thing, but he wasn't. And that silence was more eloquent than any words. Gavin. My voice was barely audible. Do you really think so? He averted his eyes. Mom, let's not do this now. Just go back to the hall. We'll forget this incident. Forget? Jenny raised her voice even more. She's been ruining our day since this morning. I don't want her to stay. I don't want to see her behind our cake in our pictures. Gavin looked helplessly at me, then at Jenny, then back at me. I could see him agonizingly trying to find a way out of the situation. Jenny, maybe you could calm down a little. He started. No, she stomped her foot like a cranky child. I will not calm down. I want her gone. Now you're not welcome. Go away, she literally shouted last words in my face. There was silence. The guest froze, not knowing where to go. I looked at my son, expecting him to stand up for me, to say that his mother could not be an unwanted guest at his wedding. But he remained silent, high-sized, downcast. Gavin. My voice trembled. He looked up, and I saw no love in high-size. No gratitude, only weariness and frustration. Maybe you really should go, Mom, he said quietly. You've already seen the ceremony. And Jenny is upset. I felt something inside me snap the last thread that connected me to my son, snapped with an almost audible sound. Okay. I straightened, gathering the last threads of dignity. I'll leave. Congratulations to both of you. I walked slowly toward the exit, feeling the stares of the shocked guests. No one stopped me. No one said a word. Only Kifo had appeared in the doorway, tried to approach. But I shook my head. I didn't want him to fight with his father over him in the check room. I took my purse and shawl. The doorman hailed me a cab, avoiding eye contact. Apparently news of the scandal had spread instantly while I waited for the car. Miss Potter came up to me. Mrs. Grimshaw. She looked genuinely concerned. I'm so sorry about this. Perhaps in the morning when everyone has calmed down. It's all right. Miss Potter interrupted. Some things can't be fixed by apologies, but the bills, she faltered. Final accounting, we'll talk about that tomorrow. I smiled tiredly. Right now, I just wanted to get home. The cab arrived 10 minutes later. As I drove away, I took one last look at the lighted windows of Hilltop Manor there. The festivities continued, the music fell louder. Without me, it was as if I had never existed in Gavin's life. The morning after the wedding, I woke up late. My body ached like I'd run a marathon, even though I hadn't physically done anything strenuous yesterday. Emotional exhaustion is what it was in the first seconds after waking up. I thought everything that had happened was just a bad dream, but reality quickly returned me. Son had allowed his new wife to kick me out of the wedding I had paid for. I made myself some tea, though. I had no appetite. My cell phone turned off last night, lay on the kitchen table. I hesitated before turning it on. I didn't want to hear an apology, much less an accusation, but I realized that sooner or later I would have to face the consequences of my decision not to pay the rest of my bills, my phone. Buzzer-taking messages, 12 missed calls and 8 messages, most from Gavin, a couple from Keith, and one from an unfamiliar number, probably from Miss Potter. I decided to read the messages. First, Mom, we need to talk, call me when you see this was the first message from Gavin sent late last night. Why aren't you answering? It's urgent. The second. From him an hour later, Grandma, are you okay? Please answer, from Keith, sent around midnight. The other messages from Gavin grew more insistent and irritated. Mom, there's a billing problem here. Administration says you refuse to pay the balance. Is this some kind of misunderstanding? Call me back immediately. Do you realize the situation you've put us in? The last message came just a few minutes ago. On my way to your place. I'll be there in 30 minutes. I sighed. So Gavin would be harassed soon. I wondered what kind of words he'd walk in with, apology or accusation. I already knew the answer though, as I cleaned myself up, washing my face, brushing my hair, putting on my house dress. A plan was forming in my head. No, I wouldn't pay for the rest of the wedding, but it wasn't just about the money. I wasn't going to let myself be used anymore, manipulated through guilt or maternal duty. Enough was enough. Exactly 25 minutes later, the doorbell rang, sharp, insistent. I opened it and saw Gavin. He looked exhausted, wrinkled shirt, circles under his eyes, disheveled hair. But what struck me most was the look on his face, not remorse, but anger. Finally, he blurted, walking uninvited into the house, why didn't you answer the phone? Do you have any idea what you've done? I closed the door and turned to him, still calm. Hello, Gavin. It's good to see you too, Mom. This is no time for sarcasm. He ran his hand nervously through his hair. We're in serious trouble. The Hilltop Manor administration says you've refused to pay the balance. For the wedding, they demand the full amount by the end of the day, or they'll sue. I raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? And Gavin stared at me in bewilderment. You have to pay. You promised. I promised to pay for my son's wedding, where I would be a welcome guest, I said calmly. But as your wife made it clear, I was not welcome, and you had agreed to that. Gavin blushed, not with shame, but with anger. Mom, you're a grown man. Jenny was nervous, drank champagne, said too much. It happens at weddings. You can't just go and sabotage. Financial sabotage, financial sabotage. I chuckled involuntarily. That's an interesting way of putting it. What do you call letting your wife publicly humiliate your mother? What do you call taking her side? I didn't take sides. Raised his voice. I was trying to defuse the situation by sending me home. I finished for him. A very effective way of doing that. Gavin rushed over to the couch and sank heavily onto it, wrapping his arms around his head. Mom, please, I haven't slept all night. Jenny is hysterical. Her parents are furious. If the bills aren't paid, it'll be a scandal for the whole town. Think of my reputation. Did you think about my feelings when you let Jenny kick me out? I asked quietly. He looked up at me, and a shadow flashed in his eyes. Perhaps realization, perhaps remorse, but it faded quickly. Look, you understand that you were uncomfortable. I apologized for Jenny. She was nervous. But you can't punish use like that. This is you. It's blackmail. No, Gavin. I shook my head. It's not blackmail. It's consequence. Every action has consequences. You and Jenny made your choice yesterday. Now live with it. But the bills, he started, choking on his indignation. You promised. We can't pay that kind of money. We have a house loaner. New car. You have a good job, I said. So does Jenny. You'll do fine, Mom. You don't understand. He jumped to his feet. It's not just about the money. If we don't pay, it will be a disgrace. Everyone will say we're having an unaffordable wedding, that we're crooks. Isn't that right? I looked him straight in the eye. You had a wedding with money you couldn't afford. You used me as an ATM machine and then threw me away when I became inconvenient. That's not fair. Gavin pounded his fist on the wall. We didn't use you. You offered to help. Yes, I did. I agreed because I wanted to be a part of your happy day. But what I got instead was humiliation. Gavin took a deep breath, clearly trying to calm down. When he spoke again, his voice sounded quieter, more judicious. Mum, I understand that you're upset, but let's be rational. Think of your reputation. 2, if you don't pay, people will say you're a stingy, vindictive old woman. I smiled involuntarily. He's moved on to manipulation. How predictable. I don't care what people say, Gavin, at my age. It's becoming remarkably unimportant. What about Keith? He's changed tactics. You're putting him in a terrible position. He'll be caught between 2 fires. Leave Keith out of this. I said, my voice hardening. He has nothing to do with this. He's my son. Gavin exclaimed, and your grandson. You're destroying our family with your selfishness. That was it, the word I expected to hear, selfishness, all my life. I've given time, money, love, and whenever I tried to set boundaries, I was accused of selfishness. I wonder, I said quietly, when I gave the last of my savings to your education, was that selfishness? When I helped with the down payment on the house, was that selfish? And when I agreed to pay for a wedding that even your fiancé with her Royaldmans couldn't afford, was that selfishness too? Gavin looked away, but he didn't give up, are you? Know exactly what I mean. If you really love me, you won't put me in this position. You'll pay your bills and forget last night's incident. No, I said firmly, I won't pay. And I won't forget Hested at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Are you serious? You're really willing to ruin my life because of your resentment? I'm not ruining your life, Gavin. I shook my head. If a few thousands can ruin your life, maybe you should think about your priorities. He grabbed the jacket he'd thrown on the back of the chair. You know what? Jenny was right about you. You've always been like that, cold, calculating, controlling. You never really loved me. You only loved the power that money gave you. His word hurt more than a slap. But I didn't show it. It makes you feel better, Gavin, I said quietly. But we both know the truth. He laughed bitterly. The truth is that you're jealous that I found a woman who loves me, that I have a life of my own. You can't stand it, so you're trying to ruin it. Go away, Gavin pointed at the door. Before we both say something we'll regret. Oh, I won't regret it. He headed for the exit. I'm Fenella, saying what I've been thinking for years, you know. After my father died, you became unbearable, always prying into my life, trying to control everything. The only reason I put up with it was for the money. Yeah, I'll admit it was your damn money, but you know what, it's not worth it. I'd rather live in debt than with a rock around my neck like you. He slammed door so hard that a framed photograph fell off the wall, the glass shattered, symbolic. It was our family picture, me, Alfred and little Gavin on a picnic. We were all smiling. I'd picked up frame, carefully removing the photo from under the shards. Strangely, I felt no tears. There was an emptiness inside, and a strange relief at the same time. It was as if a boil that had been brewing for years had finally burst, releasing all the pus. An hour later, Keith called. Grandma, are you okay? Dad just left you. He's furious. I'm fine, honey, I answered, and it was the truth. But your father doesn't seem to be. He called, miling something about bills and how you refused to pay. Keith's voice sounded concerned. Is that true? Yes, I answered simply. I'm not paying the rest of the wedding bills after the way they treated you. I can understand them. Keith's voice sounded approving, but Dad's in a panic. He says Hilltop Manor is threatening to sue if they don't pay by tomorrow. Let them pay it themselves. I said they have the means. They may have to postpone their honeymoon in the Maldives, or sell one of their cars, but they'll manage. Grandma, Keith falteridium, totally on your side. What they've done is unforgivable, but don't you think it could lead to a complete breakdown in the relationship? I sighed. Honey, their relationship broke down yesterday when your father let his wife kick me out of the wedding. Everything else is just consequences. You're probably right, he agreed sadly. It's just I don't want Tobe caught between 2 fires, and you won't, I said firmly. I would never put you in that position. You can talk to your father like you used to. My relationship with him is one thing, your sis another. Thank you, he exhaled with relief. Listen, I want to come visit you this weekend. Just to be together. Okay, sure, honey. I'd be really happy. After talking to Keith, I decided to turn my phone off for another day. I needed time to think about my next move. I hadn't a doubt that Gavin and Jenny would not give up trying to get me to pay either through manipulation or threats. The next morning the doorbell rang. I hesitated to open it, suspecting it might be Jenny coming to make another scene, but when I looked out the window, I saw a middle-aged woman in a business suit, a stranger. "Mrs. Grimshaw?" she asked when I opened the door. "My name is Elizabeth Norris, and I represent the administration of Hilltop Manor." "Come in, Miss Norris." I invited her in. "I was expecting your visit." She looked a little surprised at my calmness, but quickly pulled herself together. "Mrs. Grimshaw, we have a problem with your son's wedding payment. According to our records, you agreed to pay all the costs, but yesterday you refused to make the final payment. I'd like to clear the air." I pointed her to a chair. "Tea, coffee?" "No, thank you." She sat down, placing the file on her lap. "Mrs. Grimshaw, I understand there was an incident. Miss Potter informed me of it, but from a legal standpoint, legally interrupted. I signed no contract with Hilltop Manor. The arrangements were verbal between me and my son. I agreed to pay for the wedding under certain conditions, which were not met. Therefore, I do not feel obligated to pay their remainder." Miss Norris frowned. "But you made a down payment. That implies it only implies that." "I made a down payment," I replied calmly, "which by the way is non-refundable, as I'm sure you know, Sir. Hilltop Manor has suffered no loss. The balance is substantial." She opened their folder and showed me the bill. "Your son and his wife claim they can't pay if it's their problem." I shrugged. "They ordered the services, they got them. They should pay." "Mrs. Grimshaw, Miss Norris changed tactics. I understand you're upset, but think of your family's reputation. If the bill is not paid, we will be forced to go to court. It'll become a public matter." "I'm not worried about that," I replied honestly. "At my age, a reputation is the last thing to worry about." She sighed, clearly not expecting such a rebuff from an older woman. "All right, Mrs. Grimshaw, I'll convey your position to the management, but I must warn you that if the bill is not paid by the end of the week, legal action will follow." "I understand." I nodded. "Good luck." After Miss Norris left, I felt a strange peace. All my life I'd been afraid of conflict, trying to please, to be good, but now that I had nothing to lose, I could finally allow myself to be honest. And it was liberating. That evening the doorbell rang again. This time it was Jenny, alone, without Gavin. She looked very different from the wedding. No makeup, plain clothes, tear-stained, eyes newness. She began without greeting. "We need to talk. Come in." I stepped back, letting her into the house. She walked into the living room and stopped, fidgeting nervously with the strap off a bag. "Look, I came to apologize for my behavior at the wedding. I was nervous. I drank too much champagne. I shouldn't have said those things, but you said them." I said, not asking her to sit down. "Yes, and I regret it." She lowered her eyes. "It was a terrible thing to do. I understand why you're upset." I watched her carefully. Her apology sounded stilted, insincere. This wasn't the same Jenny who'd yelled at me on the terrace, and not the one who spent months planning every detail of the wedding with manic precision. This was the actress playing the part of the remorseful daughter-in-law. "What do you want, Jenny?" I asked bluntly. She blinked, confessed by my bluntness. "Yeah, I want to make up, start over, for Gavin's sake, and for the bills that need to be paid, of course." I added. Her face twitched, the mask of remorse slipping for a moment, revealing irritation. "Yes, there is that," she admitted, quickly regaining control. "But it's not just about money or newness. I really want a good relationship with you." "Why?" Asked, "You've made it clear that I'm a nuisance to you, an unwanted guest. Why would you want a good relationship with me?" She faltered, obviously unprepared for such a question. "You're Gavin's mother, part of his life, which means mine too." "Interesting that you didn't think of that when you kicked me out of theating," I said. "Or when you planned the seating chart, sending me to a table with strangers. Or when you demanded I buy a new dress because mine didn't fit your color scheme." I admit I was too demanding. Jenny made a pitiful face. "Weddings are a stressful time. I wanted everything to be perfect. And now you want me to pay for that perfection." I finished for her. She swallowed, clearly fighting the urge to say something harsh. "Yes, on Eunice. I hope you will pay the bills as promised, but that's not the only reason." I'm here, I genuinely want to mend the relationship, no, Jenny. I shook my head. You're not sincere. You came here because Gavin failed in his task of making me pay. Now it's your turn first. The stick now. The carrot, very predictable, her face changed again, the pleasant mask falling away completely. All right, she said sharp, let's not play games. Yes, I'm here for the money, because your son, my husband, is desperate. We can't pay this amount. If we don't pay Hilltop Manor, they'll sue us, and it'll ruin Gavin's career. Is that what you want? I want Jenny you weren't interested in when you kicked me out of the wedding. I replied calmly, Wisehold, I care what you want because it's not about me, she exclaimed. This is about Gavin, your son. Are you really willing to ruin his life because of your resentment? Ruined my life too, I said. But it didn't bother you, Jenny gritted her teeth. You're acting like a child, and I for an Anne. I really, at your age, at what age do you think it's appropriate to let others wipe their feet on you? I asked 7,080, or only when you're dead. You're just a vindictive old woman. Jenny shrieked. Gavin was right about you. You were always trying to control him through money. But you know what, we can do this without you. I'll sell my car. We'll take out a loan, but we'll pay the damn bills, and then that's it. You'll never see you, sir. Keith again. Keith, I raised an eyebrow. He's a grown man. You can't stop him from seeing me. We'll see. She grabbed her bag and headed for the exit. He won't want to ruin his relationship with his father for the sake of an old woman who will soon go to her grave. With those words, flew out of the house, slamming the door. I slowly sank into the chair. Their threats about Keith were painful, but I knew they were empty words. My grandson was an intelligent, independent young man. He would decide for himself who he wanted to socialize with the next day. I received a call from the Hilltop Manor attorney. He was more professional than Mr. Norris, but the gist of the conversation was the same. If Bill was not paid, a lawsuit would follow. I politely explained my position and ended the conversation. I then called my own lawyer, Mr. Parker, who had handled me affairs since Alfred's death. Mrs. Grimshaw, it's good to hear from you. His voice sounded warm. What can I do for you, Mr. Parker? I'd like to make some changes to my will, I said, and perhaps consult on a possible lawsuit against me. We made an appointment for the next day. When I hung up the phone, I felt strangely calm for the first time in a long time. I wasn't acting out of fear or duty, but out of respect for myself, and let Jenny think I was a vindictive old woman. I knew I was just setting healthy boundaries I should have set years ago. The spring sun was peeking through the windows of my new apartment, filling it with light and warmth. I sat at a small table on the balcony with a cup of tea, admiring the view of the park. It had been exactly 6 months since the day Jenny had kicked me out of the wedding. 6 months that had completely changed my life after all the events. I'd made a decision. I'd matured long ago, but lacked the resolve to sell the house. The old Victorian mansion that held so many memories had become too much for a single elderly woman, plus it was tying to a past I was determined to let go of. The sale went surprisingly quickly. A young family with 2 children fell in love with the house at first sight, and I was happy to hear children's laughter again. The proceeds were enough to buy a cozy 1-bedroom apartment in the New Cumberland neighborhood and build up a solid financial reserve. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of a modern building with an elevator in important condition for a person with bad knees. The windows overlooked the city park, and within a 5-minute walk there were all the necessary stores, a pharmacy, and a cozy cafe where I liked to have breakfast on Sundays. I hadn't spoken to Gavin or Jenny since after Jenny's visit and her threats about Keith. I expected further attempts at pressure, but there were none, as I found out later from Keith. They had to take out a loan to pay off Hilltop Manor, and it took a serious hit on their finances. The honeymoon in the Maldives was cancelled. Jenny sold her car. Apparently the experience was painful enough to discourage them from continuing the conflict. Keith remained the only thread linking me to my old life. My grandson, in spite of Jenny's threats, did not stop communicating with me. On the contrary, our relationship became even stronger. He came regularly on weekends, helped with the move, introduced me to his friends. Sometimes we would just talk for hours about his studies, about my new life, about books, about the world. He said during one of these visits, "I've never seen you so free." I looked at him in surprise. "Free, yes." He nodded, helping me organize the books on new shelves you used. To be a little tense, like you were always waiting for something to happen. But now it's like you've spread your wings. His words made me think. Indeed, despite my age and all turmoil, I felt lighter, calmer. It was as if I'd shed the heavy weight I'd been carrying all my life. A new life required a new environment. I enrolled in a computer literacy course for the elderly at the local library. Thanks to Keith's lessons, I already had basic skills, but I wanted to improve them. To my surprise, I met many interesting people my age with similar stories and experiences we especially bonded with. Doris, a former literate teacher, a widow like me, she lived nearby, and soon we started going for walks together, to the movies, to that Sunday cafe. She was easy to be with, not pretenses, no expectations, just two women sharing life experience. I know. "And Eunice," she said one day as we sat in the park watching the children playing, "I always thought it was too late to start something new at our age. But you've changed my mind." I smiled as I watched a little girl trying to fly a kite. "It's never too late to start something new, Doris. The only question is whether we have the courage." After taking a computer course, I decided to take it a step further and volunteered at the same library twice a week. I helped other elderly people to learn computer and internet skills. It made me feel useful and gave my days meaning. Seeing an 80-year-old woman send an email to her grandson for the first time in her life, or a 75-year-old man learn how to use Skype to communicate with his children abroad was a real joy. I also resumed my gardening blog. Although I no longer had my own garden, I turned my balcony into a real flower garden and shared tips on growing plants in urban conditions. To my surprise, their blog became quite popular. The number of subscribers grew to several hundred and then thousands. "You're a real internet star." Grandma Keith laughed as he helped me set up my social media accounts. "Soon you'll have more followers than I do." One day, when I was at the library for another class, I noticed a new visitor, an older man with a neat grey beard and kind eyes. He sat in the last row and listened attentively to my explanations about the principles of email. After the class, he came up to me. Eunice Grimshaw," he asked with slight uncertainty. "That's you, isn't it?" I looked at him closely, trying to remember where I'd seen him before. "Yes, that's me." "And you are Robert Fleming," he smiled. "We worked together at Central Hospital. I was a doctor in the cardiology department." "Dr. Fleming, I remembered him now. Of course you did. It's just that you've changed, older." "You mean?" He laughed. "Well, 20 years is a long time." We got to talking. It turned out that Robert had been widowed 3 years ago and had recently moved to Cumberland to be closer to his daughter and grandchildren. He too had decided to learn a computer to keep up with the times. "I had already learned how to use email," he said. "But social networking is a bit of a mystery to me. So I came to your courses after class." He suggested having tea in the cafe across the street from the library. I agreed, and we spent a pleasant hour reminiscing about old colleagues and hospital experiences. "You've changed, Eunice," he said, suddenly looking at me carefully. "And it's not just an appearance. You've become more confident. You used to be so quiet, always in the shadows. Life teaches you a lot." I smiled, "especially when you're over 70. "I wouldn't say 70, Robert smiled, "but 65, Yaugno. I always thought you were an attractive woman. But back then we both had families, jobs." I felt myself blushing at 78. "Who'd have thought it, Robert? You flatter me." "Not at all." He was serious. "I'm just saying what I think. Perhaps we should have dinner together sometime. I know a good Italian restaurant near me." Said yes, surprised at my own audacity. A date at my age, it seemed so unexpected and exciting. Dinner was a week later. Robert was gallantly conversation. Light and easy, we discovered that we had much in common. A love of classical music, gardening, traveling. By the end of the evening, I realized that I hadn't felt so good in the company of a man in a long time. "Can he walk you home?" Robert asked as we left the restaurant. "I'd love to," I answered. We walked slowly, my knees, his heart, age taking its toll. but there was a beauty in that slowness. We talked about the stars, about childhood, about dreams that had not come true at the door of my house. Robert kissed me lightly on the cheek. Thank you for a lovely evening. And Eunice, I hope we'll do it again. We will. I smiled, feeling a strange excitement that seemed like it should have left me long ago. Our meetings became regular. We went to the movies, to the theater, to concerts. Sometimes we just walked in the park or sat on my balcony talking about everything in the world. Robert was attentive, intelligent conversationalist with a great sense of humor. He didn't try to rush things, respecting my boundaries. Keith was delighted with all friendship. Grandma, you're getting younger before your eyes, he said, noticing the new haircut and dress I'd made before our next date. Dr. Fleming is a lucky man. I just smiled back. Our relationship with Robert was special. Not the aura of youthful passion, but the deep, warm affection of two people who had lived long lives and knew the value of each day. One spring day, exactly 6 months after Gavin's wedding, Robert asked me to go out of town. He had rented a small car with an automatic transmission. It was more convenient at our age. We left early in the morning when the town was just waking up. The day promised to be warm and sunny. Robert drove confidently. Despite his age, we drove out of Cumberland and down a scenic road that led to the coast. Where are we going? I asked, looking out the window at the scenery. You'll see. Robert smiled enigmatically. It's a surprise. An hour later, we arrived at a small fishing village. Narrow streets, white houses with blue shutters, the smell of the sea in the air. All this created a feeling of another world, far from the bustle of the city. Robert parked the car in a small square and helped me out. My sister lives here, he explained. She has a small house overlooking the sea. She's traveling in Europe now, and she offered me the use of the house whenever I wanted. We walked up a steep street to a white house on a hill. The view from the terrace was breathtaking, the vast sea glistening in the spring sunshine. It's beautiful here, I breathed, unable to tear my gaze away from the horizon, where the sky merged with the water. I thought you'd like it. Robert stood beside me, touching my arm lightly. When I was a kid, we used to come here every summer with my parents. This place always gave me a sense of freedom and peace. We spent a wonderful day walking along the shore, collecting shells, eating lunch at a small restaurant that served the freshest seafood. Robert told stories from his childhood, and I shared memories of traveling with Alfred and little Gavin, remembering my son. I no longer felt the sharp pain I used to feel, only a slight sadness for what could have been. But wasn't I accepted reality as it was, and that acceptance brought me inner peace. In the evening, sitting on the terrace with a glass of light wine, we watched the sun slowly sink into the sea, coloring the sky and water in shades of gold and purple. On Eunice, Robert turned tone, his eyes serious. I want to ask you something. My heart beat faster for some reason. Yes, my sister has offered to look after the house for me while she's in Europe. It's at least 6 months. I thought maybe you'd like to spend the summer here with me. I stared at him, trying to comprehend the suggestion. You mean moving here? Not permanently, he hastened to clarify. Just for the summer. It's a nice climate. The sea, fresh air, your knees will feel better. I'll enjoy your company. I've been thinking to spend the summer by the sea, away from the bustle of the city, with a man who has become dear to me over these months. 6 months ago, I wouldn't have dared to take such a step. But now, what about my apartment? What about volunteering? I asked. Practically, the apartment can be closed for the summer. Robert smiled. And volunteering, you could do online counseling. The internet is great here. I looked at the sea, at the sunset sky, then at Robert, his kind face, his attentive eyes, his grey beard, and suddenly I realized that I wanted this. I wanted new experiences, new impressions, new feelings. Yes, I said simply, I'd like to spend the summer here. His smile was brighter than the setting sun. You make me happy. And Eunice, we watched the last rays of the sun disappear over the horizon. I thought about how amazing life is at 78. I was starting a new chapter without fear, without regrets, with an open heart. Returning to Cumberland in the evening, I felt a strange peacefulness. It was as if all the pieces of the puzzle were finally falling into place. I didn't know what the future would bring, but I was ready to embrace it with all its joys and challenges at home. I had a message from Keith waiting for me. He was going to come over for the weekend. I decided to tell him about my plans for the summer, and sure he'd be happy for mentioning. Ready for bed, I went to the window. The city was twinkling with lights like a reflection of a starry sky somewhere. Out there in one of the houses lived my son and his wife. Perhaps someday our paths would cross again, but now I was grateful to fate that I had found the strength to break free from the circle of toxic relationships, that I had found new friends, new interests, new feelings. Getting rid of toxic relationships had opened the door to a peaceful and dignified old age. I was finally living for myself, not for other people's expectations. And that was the most valuable gift I could give myself. Thank you, Alfred, I whispered, looking up at the stars. You always said I was stronger than I thought. I finally believed it as I fell asleep. I thought of the sea, of the summer house, of Robert, about the new chapter of my life that was just beginning. And that thought filled my heart with warmth and